Did you know that in Japan, black teeth were fashionable for several centuries? Or that European high society ladies almost all had insects and parasites in their hair? In this video, I'll tell you the most horrifying and strange facts about past fashion trends. And at the end of the video, you'll learn about the torments that young girls in China had to endure for 1,000 years. Enjoy watching. Crinolines. Girls will do anything for beauty. Nowadays, it's popular to use a lot of makeup, hide all skin imperfections, and much more. And all of this significantly affects skin health. Once, I used a facial product that my friend was using. It was horrible. It reminded me of a story I studied in school about how ladies a couple of centuries ago wore huge skirts. I found some interesting facts about this fashion. These enormous skirts are called crinolines, and they appeared in the 1830s, gaining the most popularity in the mid-19th century. Here's what I found interesting about them. Crinolines allowed for the creation of striking silhouettes that were popular among the upper class. Wide skirts tapered at the waist, emphasizing its slenderness. Fashion magazines of the time often featured images of ladies in crinoline dresses, reflecting the ideals of female beauty and elegance. However, this trend had several drawbacks. Their large size made movement, entering narrow doors, and even sitting difficult. Comical situations often arose when women couldn't pass by each other. There were also cases of crinolines catching fire from open flames. I also learned that only very wealthy people could afford such clothing. First, the materials were quite expensive. Second, wearing such skirts required a whole team of servants to care for the lady. So, if I saw such a lady on the street, I would immediately know she came from high society. Nowadays, such attire is considered quite comical. Codpiece. Fashion is a very strange thing. I can understand huge skirts that narrow the waist. But the next item, once considered the height of fashion, gives me mixed feelings. It's the codpiece. Don't know what it is? I didn't either until I started preparing for this video. The codpiece is a special groin pouch that was extremely popular among men in the 16th century. What was its purpose? Initially, it was functional, providing comfort and protection for men's genitals when wearing tight trousers. However, over time, it became a fashion item symbolizing masculinity and status. Originally, the codpiece had a practical function. Small items like money or keys could be placed in it, but after a century, it began to be used quite differently. Noblemen sought to acquire the largest and most ornate codpieces to make them stand out as much as possible. And when everyone around wears something like this, it becomes the norm in society. Over time, the codpiece became a symbol of sexuality and even manliness. The bigger it was and the better the materials, the more significant the person was considered. Such pouches were often adorned with precious stones. Truly, tastes were strange back then. Nowadays, such clothing looks extremely comical. It seems something similar is only used by real professionals in ballet. Although the original idea was quite logical, a safe place to store money. My mom used to sew money into my underwear when I went to summer camp. Do you have similar stories? Share them in the comments. Ohaguro. Alright, it's time to tell you about a truly strange fashion. Have you ever thought that somewhere in the world, black teeth are considered beautiful? Today, even yellow teeth are frowned upon. If you don't have white and clean teeth, society might look down on you as being unkempt. But in Japan during the Edo period, from the 17th to the 19th century, it was customary to blacken your teeth. Yes, a guy with rotten and black teeth would be considered a real Apollo. As usual, this trend started with the upper class. At the height of its popularity, Ohaguro was practiced only by aristocrats and samurai. Over time, this fashion trend became more widespread. However, this practice wasn't entirely bad. In fact, it was an effective way to protect oral health. The solution used for blackening had antiseptic properties and helped protect teeth from cavities and other diseases. Its composition was quite unusual. Plant components were added to improve taste and smell, along with fermented iron filings mixed with vinegar and tea. Teeth were coated with this solution several times to achieve a deep black color. The procedure was performed regularly as the color would wash away over time. In traditional Japanese culture, black teeth were considered beautiful and refined. The contrast between the white face, often whitened by women, and the black teeth created a specific and harmonious image. Furthermore, blackening teeth was a sign of maturity and status. During the Edo period, this practice was often associated with marriage. Married women and geishas regularly blackened their teeth. It also served as a symbol of belonging to a certain social group. Today, ohaguro is rarely practiced, but it still holds its place in traditional Japanese culture. Black teeth can sometimes be seen in kabuki theater or at festivals where they are used to recreate historical images. Personally, I find this fashion too strange and even unattractive, but it's important to remember that I'm viewing this practice from a typical European perspective. In Asia, there are actually many such specific elements of fashion. Hair powder. Well, I think it's time to return to something more ordinary. Those Japanese fashion traditions were just too strange. By the way, if you want to learn more about Asian countries, let me know in the comments. I'll definitely find something new and interesting for you. What's next on our list? Next, I want to tell you about a very standard fashion item that was extremely popular in the 18th century. What is it? Hair powder. Among European nobility, white hair was considered a status symbol. It emphasized a person's elegance and beauty. At least that's how it was thought back then. The main ingredient in hair powder was starch, which could be made from wheat, potatoes, or rice. Aromatic substances such as lavender, rose, or violet were added to give the hair a pleasant scent. It wasn't always just white, though. Depending on fashion trends, the powder could be dyed gray or even pastel shades. But why was this popular only among the nobility? Again, the difficulty lay in applying the powder. First, the hair was greased with fat or pomade to help the powder stick better. Then it was applied using a special powder puff or brush, evenly distributing it across the entire area. Frames and rollers were used to create complex hairstyles, helping to give the hair the desired shape and volume. To be fair, this powder did help with personal hygiene. It hid dirty hair since washing hair was rare at the time. The powder also absorbed grease and odors, making hair look and smell fresh. However, combined with the monstrous large hairstyles of the ladies of that time, it was mainly used for aesthetics. Women wore huge wigs or styled their own hair into high towers adorned with feathers, ribbons, flowers, and other decorative elements. In these pillars, insects and parasites often took residence. After all, washing hair back then was quite difficult, but people would do anything to win the heart of their beloved Chinese lotus feet. I personally think that originally, all these fashionable items and trends that became popular a couple of centuries ago were intended to be something good. However, when they became widespread, they took a different turn. But what I'm going to tell you next might literally shock you with its stupidity and cruelty. Have you ever heard of Chinese lotus feet? No? Then take a seat. This peculiar practice of foot binding lasted until the 20th century. And attention, girls did this for a whole 1,000 years. This tradition was very controversial, even for Asia. Foot binding began at an early age, usually around 4 years old when bones were still soft and pliable. First, the feet were steamed in hot water with herbs and animal fat. This made the skin soft. After that, the feet were tightly bound with long ribbons, compressing them until the bones almost broke. All this horror was just to make them take on the desired shape and size. Personally, I think you can't go against nature, and such manipulations wouldn't help much. But it didn't stop there. The process was extremely painful and often led to infections, gangrene, and other complications. As a result, the feet became deformed and very small, resembling the shape of a lotus bud. Don't you think such a practice should have ended within the first few years of its inception? But it lasted 1,000 years. Horrifying! However, I can understand the people of that time. Strange fashion trends existed almost everywhere. In China, small feet were considered a sign of female beauty and grace. They symbolized refinement, femininity, and sexuality. Women with lotus feet had high chances of a successful marriage. So, parents themselves tortured their children to marry them off into more prosperous families. Additionally, lotus feet were a sign of high social status. Moreover, women with lotus feet were physically limited and couldn't perform hard labor. Not the most pleasant story, is it? Corsets. I recently heard an interesting phrase that really holds true. Fashion is cyclical. At the beginning of history, more athletic and thin people were considered beautiful. Then slightly plump women and men were idolized. Trends are changing again now. This applies not only to body proportions, but also to clothing. You've probably noticed how corsets have become popular among girls today, but they are far from what was going on a few centuries ago. In the 16th century, corsets began to play a very important role in women's fashion. They appeared in Europe and were initially part of both men's and women's wardrobes. These corsets contained special rigid structures inside and were laced up at the back. There were several types. The first type was Tudor corsets, worn under dresses. They were used to lift and compress the chest to create a flat silhouette. The second type was French corsets. In the Baroque era, they were the most elegant, used to compress the waist and support the chest, creating a striking and feminine silhouette. The third type was Victorian corsets. They were tall and tight with complex lacing. But what was the purpose of all this? It's simple. Corsets gave women femininity and sexuality by emphasizing the curves of their figures, essentially just like today. Moreover, they were worn only by people of high social status. As usual, however, there were many downsides. This type of clothing severely restricted breathing. Girls who chased beauty tightened their corsets so much that they even broke their ribs. Naturally, this led to no good. Even if it didn't go that far, corsets at least caused deformation of the ribs and internal organs. So I really hope that such fashion doesn't make a comeback in our time. Personal opinion. I would like to note that all the fashion elements mentioned today were very controversial. Fortunately, over time, people realized that such things could lead to very sad consequences. Just look at those bindings that were popular in China for 1,000 years. I was shocked when I found an article about it. It's very sad that such things ever happened on our planet. After all, in the name of supposed beauty, children were turned into real cripples. And how good it is that this is no longer widespread in our society. These were not all the interesting fashion items I could tell you about. If you want a continuation of this topic, be sure to write about it in the comments. These were some of the strangest and most interesting fashion items you might not have known about. Share your thoughts on this. Personally, I note that for everything I mentioned today, a full professional team was needed. Speaking of pros, friends, you have the opportunity to join our team. If you have video editing skills, can voice over videos in Russian, English, and other languages, or write interesting scripts, we would be happy to work with you. Contact us through the Telegram bot. The link is in the description. And thank you for your attention.